Hi, it's Manwara here. I'm live on YouTube and LinkedIn. As promised, I'm back on Sunday, just sharing my knowledge and a little bit of insight into how to master bid writing. If you are a fundraiser or you've never written a bid before and I really want to give it a go, I've been sharing my tips. I myself am a fundraising expert, have been fundraising, bid writing for over 30 years, have been working in the not-for-profit sector for that many years. And fundraising is just something I understand as a great way for charities and non-profits to build sustainability as organizations. And I've always fundraised, but at the beginning when I started writing bids, it was really challenging, and it's still challenging because there's an awful lot of competition in funding or public funding. There's too many organizations that are going to apply for the same pot of money. But I want to share some of my skills, some of my tips actually in terms of how to master. So last week, I covered some of the tips and some of the possible pitfalls to avoid. And this week, what I want to do is share with you some of the ideas around need and how do you go about organizing, figuring out need when you're writing a funding application. I think I'm hoping that anything I share is going to be most useful for small charities in particular and community organizations, CICs that are right this moment in time helping a lot of our community that's struggling with the cost of living crisis. So the whole purpose of what I'm doing is to just give you a bit more insight and encourage smaller organizations that are doing wonderful work at a grassroots level to build up the courage to apply for funding. Because funders right now are really wanting to fund the grassroots level organizations, those that are working with people on the ground. But quite often what happens in the voluntary sector, the charity sector, especially small charities, is we don't have the resources or the capacity to actually write bids. So we don't often go for that really crucial bit of funding that might be out there, and actually we're capable of delivering the service. And in fact, our community needs us and we don't have the resources. So we really do need that money. So I hope that anything I share today you're going to find it useful. And if you have any questions or you have any feedback, I would really appreciate that. You can find today's session on YouTube afterwards on my channel. You'll be able to access it as well on my LinkedIn page, so you can access it anytime if there's anything on the session that you want to refer back to. So I'm going to start off with two big common mistakes in writing bids and funding applications. One of them is not reading the guidelines. I kind of touched on it last Sunday, but just to provide a little bit more sort of understanding around the problem you'll end up having, or in most cases, you basically will get an application that won't even be entertained by the funder because you haven't actually read the guidelines. A classic example is not knowing, for example, because the community's problems, the conditions in our communities have changed, a particular funder may have changed their strategic framework, their strategy in terms of where their focus lies, what their priority is for the time being. And I mean, I had a conversation earlier this week with somebody, and they were talking about applying to Trust for London. And Of course, I can tell you that Trust for London is not currently taking applications because they decided to commit to their existing grantees. So it's things like that, you get yourself all ready and you start filling in an application form, waste so much time and energy, not even reading the guidelines properly or being aware what the current situation is. So it's a great starting point to actually go to the funder strategic framework, figure out what it is that they are prioritizing at the moment. For example, lottery is supporting communities. The lottery funding that's their primary, their priority right now, supporting communities. And then the detail will be on their website where you should really read the guidelines, because there will be so much more information that will give you an idea whether spending your time and energy on an application right now is the right thing to do, and also having a clear understanding whether the project that you want to deliver actually meets the needs of the funder. So that, I would say, is around understanding and reading guidelines. And I know it sounds so obvious, but all of us can fall foul of that. So the second mistake around bid writing is assuming that the funder knows what you do, what your organization does. Just because your organization for example, may sound like a community center from its name, there is no way that the funder, other than obviously what they see online or any other evidence that you provide, is going to be clued up about what you are doing as an organization. So a lot of small charities will cut and paste, and I've worked in environments there where applications will be cut and pasted and sent to several funders at the same time. This is the mistake many of you are making. As a small charity or as a community organization, don't cut and paste. The same approach is not going to work with every single funder. Remember, their priorities are different, their framework is different, that they're actually focusing on. So I would say that on the one hand, you could have lots of detail or too much detail, and that could be a problem. But on the other hand, you might have not enough detail for a funder to make a decision. So you make the assumption, we work with youth, so the funder must know what we do. No, the funder doesn't know. And not every youth organization does the same kind of work. So it's very important that the need you're trying to meet in the community is clear, concise, and compelling in your funding application. When I say compelling, I mean, I feel like a lot of the small charities and organizations, we're not very good at talking about our strengths. And it is so important, if you're applying for public funding, to make sure that you showcase your organization's strengths. So, for example, if your organization is leaders in the community for having really good mental health, being a really good mental health campaigner, ambassador, or you work with a lot of vulnerable adults and you have systems in place and you have a track record, maybe you've been working with older people for the last 10 years, that's your strength as an organization. You might have on your board people that come with lived experience in mental health, or it could be people that come with lived experience in, homelessness. And the value of lived experience is such a strong attribute for a charity to have on board. So make sure that you utilize that, and actually, instead of assuming that funder is going to know, or the funder is not gonna it won't score any brownies, it's actually the other way around. It shows the strength of an organization if you've got people on your board, if you've got your management committee, that is, for voluntary organizations, it demonstrates that you have expertise around those subject matters that those people have lived experience in. So your project needs to meet an urgent need in the community. So, for example, right now we've got the cost of living crisis. It's something that I would point out actually. Trust for London, that's the grant funder, they have an amazing website, and on their website you can find information around all the poverty profile for the whole of London. It's actually really amazing, but and so like that gives you an indication as to if you're working in, say, for example, Haringey or Westminster or Camden or Newham, you will know what the poverty profile is like for that borough. The information on the Trust for London website is for 2019 onwards, so it's not even that old. And that's really, really useful information to use when you are trying to put together your bid. Now, you look at the poverty profile and you look at what the problems are in your locality, the London Borough, for example, where you are delivering your work or you want to deliver your work. You know the clientele you're working with, you know what the problems are in the borough. You then need to make sure that that urgent need, for example, the cost of living crisis, your project is meeting that. If your project wants to meet that urgent need, then it's most likely that it will also align with the funder's strategic priorities, because a lot of funders like Trust for London and Lloyds TSB, National Lottery, that's what their strategic aims will be. Their framework will have a number of priorities, and it should align with what the community is telling them is the current problem. So if your organization is going to go to a funder and say, actually, what we're going to do is our project is going to support maybe something that was a problem in the community 5 years ago, the funder is not going to entertain it. The funder is more likely to fund what is a current issue that your organization has put together a project and will actually help to meet that urgent need. So, for example, during the pandemic, a lot of projects that were supported by City Bridge Trust and several funders that got together and put together a huge pot of money. A lot of it was around food poverty. Right now, fuel poverty is one of the ones that I know in Waltham Forest Community Hub, where I work. We are focused on fuel poverty because all the families that we're supporting that are coming through our doors are telling us that fuel poverty is a problem. Also, Waltham Forest is the second highest borough in the whole of London that's has fuel poverty, struggles with fuel poverty. So in terms of the level, our borough is the second highest. So that kind of explains, what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to think about the project that you've put together. And if your project does not meet the need of what the current urgent need is within the community, then you need to adapt your project, or you need to review, to me, if I was on a funding panel, I would just assume that you are completely unaware of what's happening outside. And I would question whether you actually consult your service users and the community, because it's very important that you are aware of the need in the community. And that often happens when you have systems in place where you are consulting the community on a regular basis. Otherwise, how will you be aware of what the need is? So just covering urgent need, and I mentioned the two mistakes to avoid. I think one of the things that a lot of small charities aren't very good at doing is showcasing their strengths. We often don't know what our strengths are because we don't have the resources to actually review our services. We don't have the resources to as in terms of capacity building, because we are often struggling just to deliver, let alone capacity building. However, in order for an organization to survive, to become sustainable, and in the long run to grow, it's really important to review. And a lot of funders now are funding, they're providing unrestricted money, so they're funding core funds. And things like, if you want to bring training in, or you want to bring a consultant in to review your work. And when that happens, because we're so narrow down in our approach and how we deliver, we're very much like on the go. It's very hard to figure out where we're going wrong or where we need to improve. So sometimes bringing an outsider in gives us greater insight as to where we're at and help us to create a vision moving forward. So I would suggest that, if you were approaching, for example, City Bridge Trust or Lloyds TSB, I think I wrote down another funder somewhere. They are at the moment funding core funding. So I would go to them. Lloyds TSB is funding. They're providing unrestricted funding, so you can apply for it if you're a registered charity or a CIC, and capacity building support. So I think I would say, as someone who has recently, I would say in the last 2 years, gone and approached funders. We've had funding from several different sources where we have asked for capacity building support. Our most recent funder, one of our partners, Cadent Gas, they've provided capacity building support. We've had GLA funding where we had capacity building support. And most recently, we carried out an impact evaluation. So I really would encourage you as an organization to focus more on your infrastructure and your foundations, because that really helps you to build sustainability and to provide that insight, external insight as to what you need to, where your gaps are, and what you need to plug, the holes and the gaps that you need to plug to move forward. If you have any questions or anything you would like me to speak about next week, which will be episode 4, and I'm hoping that other than outputs and outcomes and describing the difference between the two, I won't really need to cover anything else. However, I'm quite open to carry on and provide either another quick session or an interactive where you could come and ask me questions. Do let me know. Please leave a comment either on my the LinkedIn or YouTube, and let me know. But I hope that what I've just shared today is going to be useful, and it will encourage you to write bids. Funding applications and being able to write them, it is an art, but you have to get it started somehow. It's not something that you instantly become good at. It takes a lot of practice. So my strong recommendation is, if you've never ever written a funding application before, give it a go. And if you get rejected or the application comes back unsuccessful, then the key is to ask the funder where you went wrong. And then it's to take away from that feedback and then go back, try to improve your last performance, go back. And that's all it is. For me, that's what I have done. And that's why I continue writing funding applications. And even now, after all these years, I don't always get it right. And when I don't get it right, I speak to the funder. I make sure the communication is really clear. And that's my magic trick, I would say. And many of you have heard me say it before, it's all about the relationships. You have to make sure that you're also building relationships with the funder, because the delivery of a project is not something that the organization is doing on their own. Without the funding, they couldn't do it. So it's almost a partnership between the funder and the organization that's been funded. And I believe that a lot of funders now, especially I know in the case of lottery, and very strongly in the case of Trust for London, Mercer's Fund company as well, they want to work with organizations that they've funded almost in partnership. So all the best. I'm going to thank you, KG. I see interactive session would be great. Okay, do my best. Only if people are happy to join me. I invite anyone who's watching now, join me at the next episode and see where we end. And then perhaps the session after that, the Sunday after, could be interactive. So thank you and have a good evening, night, day. Bye.